Good morning and welcome back to Plaas TV. AECI Plant Health not only serves the agricultural industry in South Africa, but also has a global footprint. In this morning's episode, Dr. Karin Stoll gives us some more information about this. After that, we look at an interesting discussion with Professor Charlie Reinhardt about yellow nutsedge and why it is such a threat to farmers in South Africa. But first, over to Lisa for the news.
In vandag se nuus, Agri Weskaap het onlangs versoek dat die provinsie se brandseisoenverklaring vervroeg word. Janie Strydom, uitvoerende hoof van Agri Weskaap, sê die vorige 3 tot 5 jaar van onder die gemiddelde reënval is duidelik sigbaar in laer as gemiddelde graanopbrengste. Hy sê die huidige graanoes lyk baie belovend, maar dat die provinsie in 'n stadium is waar brande 'n gevaar vir koringlande kan inhou. Die Weskaapse minister van plaaslike regering, Anton Bredel, meen sy departement het via die provinsiale rampbestuursentrum met diensverskaffers onderhandel om hulpbronne vanaf 1 November beskikbaar te maak om die veiligheid van die oes te verseker. Die Weskaapse brandseisoen begin gewoonlik op 1 Desember. En die wolmark het van dese week met 7,9% gestyg om uiteindelik teen 'n waarde van R157,17 per kilogram te sluit. Die styging is behaal ten spyte van die rand wat 1,1% sterker teen die Amerikaanse dollar verhandel het, met 'n styging van 9,13% in dollar terme. Die eerste dag van die Australiese veiling het ook goed verloop met 'n styging van 7,5%. En volgens 'n berig op Fresh Plaas verwag Namibiese tafeldruifprodusente 'n buitengewone oes met ongeveer 7,4 miljoen kartonne wat uitgevoer sal word. Dit is aansienlik meer as die 6 miljoen kartonne wat verlede jaar uitgevoer is en is hoofsaaklik te danke aan goeie reën wat vanjaar ontvang is. Die verkope van vleisbeeste in Namibië het egter met 31% gedaal in vergelyking met dieselfde tydperk in 2019. En dis dan vandag se nuus.
AECI Plant Health, unlocking nature's potential.
In today's discussion with AECI Plant Health, we focus on their international division, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Karin Stoll. Karin, tell us a bit more about the international division of AECI Plant Health.
Okay, so the international division of AECI Plant Health focuses on the business outside the borders of South Africa. So the majority of our business is in Africa, and the majority of the business is actually in Southern Africa. And the reason for that being, there's no language barrier, which we do experience in other countries, and those countries recognize the registrations that are done in South Africa. And in order for us to sell products, we have to have registrations. So that's sort of for those Southern African countries, we offer a full basket of goods. Whereas when we start moving up sort of the eastern side of Africa, we then start selecting products. So into East Africa, it's more our nutritional, adjuvant products. Those are a bit more speciality type. Then with the rest of the world, we've learned a few lessons, language barriers, etc., etc. But there we've really focused on very speciality niche products, our biological products, our adjuvant range, and then our biostimulant range. So products like Alexin, Bloodbuff, and Biocolt, those are the products that we sell, sort of what we call rest of world.
So in Southern Africa, how do these products reach the farmers?
Well, we've sort of got a dual approach in Southern Africa. We actually, AECI Plant Health owns 3 entities in Southern Africa. There's an entity in Namibia, one in Mozambique, and then one in Malawi. And so that's one avenue. Then the other avenue is through dedicated distributors, and they sort of, they distribute our products sort of on an exclusive basis, the full range.
Won't you elaborate on your operation in Malawi?
Okay, of the 3 AECI entities, the Malawian entity is the biggest. AECI acquired them in 2015, and it's actually their 40th birthday this year. Wow. Yeah, so they are kind of very much a household name in Malawi, and their focus in the market is on both the commercial and the emerging farmer. So when you move to the commercial segment, there, it's big pack sizes, quite an extensive product range. The emerging farmer, on the other hand, are smaller pack sizes and a bit more of a select, smaller range. And what they've done in Malawi, Farmers Organization, they've actually created the Nyonga pack. And this Nyonga pack is specifically for the emerging farmers, and it contains all the inputs that farmer acquires during the course of the season, but in all these small little packs. And then there's like a sheet explaining to the farmer how to use the products. And then there's a bit of PPE, the safety equipment to go with it. And that is then sold to the farmer in a pack, and he can then, whichever crop he's using, he can then apply it. They're generally cotton, tobacco, pigeon peas. Those are the kind of crops where they've designed this nifty little Nyonga pack.
Oh, that's good news. Karin, just in closing, how does the international division of AECI Plant Health reach out and service these clients?
Okay, so we obviously service not only our own entities, but also the distributors that we've appointed in all of the countries. We've got quite a highly skilled team of key account managers, technical advisors. We've got a dedicated international registration specialist, because without the registrations we can't sell, so we need to know that all happens like it should. And they visit the countries, support the distributors in the sense that they assist them with their marketing approach, training on our products, both the staff of the distributors as well as the farmers. They oversee the registration trials. Sometimes we do demonstration trials to, show what our product can do for the farmer. So, it's quite an intense kind of package that we offer, and it entails quite a bit of travel, but in that we actually get to see very nice parts of the world.
Well, that's more on AECI Plant Health International Division, and we spoke to Dr. Karin Stoll. And yes, well done with the good work you're doing in Africa.
Thank you.
Until next time.
AECI Plant Health, unlocking nature's potential.
Goeiemôre kykers, en vandag se termynmarkte kan gesien word dat beesvleis die A2 karkasprys verlede week vir die eerste keer deur die R50 per kilogram vlak beweeg het na 'n styging van 1%. Prys van C2 karkasse het egter met 1.1% gedaal en die speenkalfprys het effens verstewig met 0.7%. Wat skaapvleis aanbetref het A2 karkasse week op week weer 'n keer gedaal met 0.7%, terwyl C2 karkasse effens toegeneem het met 1.9% en die speenlamprys varkvleis met 0,7% gedaal het. Varkvleis het egter 'n stygende tendens voor en is weer week op week met 0,6% op. Die wolveiling het baie goed gedoen hierdie afgelope week, 7,9% styging vanaf die vorige veiling en in dollarterme is dit oor die 9% wat die prys gestyg het. Die grane aanbetref het mielie sterk onder druk gekom, 6,1% af terwyl die koringprys basies onveranderd gebly het en oliesade steeds goeie ondersteuning kry met 3% en 2,8% onderskeidelik op vir sojabone en sonneblom. Die rand het ook verstewig die afgelope week teenoor die euro en die dollar, 3,9% teenoor die dollar en 3,3% teenoor die euro.
NutriFeeds, die formule vir sukses.
Nutsedge is considered a major weed across the world and can cause serious losses to a wide range of crops. It is considered as one of the world's top 10 crop-damaging weeds and is certainly holding its own in South Africa. An expert in the field of weeds, Professor Charlie Reinhardt, visited the Plaas TV studio earlier this year to tell us more about this.
Despite its modest size and relatively sparse above-ground biomass, yellow nutsedge is rated amongst the world's top 10 crop-damaging weeds. An expert in the field of weeds, Dr. Charlie Reinhardt, is with us in the studio once again. Charlie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Firstly, tell us more about yellow nutsedge. Interesting name.
Before I continue just on yellow nutsedge, we should make it clear that its close compatriot in terms of causing damage to crops is purple nutsedge. So we have yellow nutsedge, Cyperus esculentus, and then you have purple nutsedge, Cyperus rotundus. And the interesting difference between the two from a farming perspective is yellow nutsedge you would get under dry land conditions. It prefers dry land conditions, and Cyperus rotundus prefers irrigation conditions. So the more wetter conditions you would find Cyperus rotundus dominating, or exclusively, just that one. But in terms of the damaging effects on crops, similar.
And what crops does it affect?
All crops in which they occur. Yeah. And to better describe that to you, I must mention a research project I had for Mondi forests. Pine trees, where pine trees was affected by Cyperus esculentus. Mondi forest didn't know it at the time. So I should digress a bit here, it's a very interesting story. So there we were, Giant's Castle area, foothills of the Drakensberg, and typically Mondi Forest would buy up farms, and they would put the whole farm under pine trees, as far as they could. And obviously, formerly, for crop production, farmers would have selected the best soils, the deepest soils, and ideal for growing maize, for instance. And here you had the pine trees suffering on old lands, as they called it. And they coined the phrase old land sickness and old land syndrome and for this. And they couldn't understand why a pine tree planted in the old land, years, the pine tree, 3 meters further, that's the distance between the trees, the way they plant them. And the next one is 3 meters outside the old land. That one grows and this one fails to grow. Develops disease, suffers, eventually must be pulled out. So they were ready to give up on former old lands, the best soil. And they couldn't understand what was wrong. And they tried everything, looked at pathogens, soil conditions, etc. And then one day, the research manager of Mondi Forest, he sat in an audience where I was speaking about allelopathy. And he came to me afterwards and he said, you know, we investigated everything except allelopathy. And me and my students tackled that challenge. And after 2 master's studies, we showed them that indeed Cyprus esculentus, the little weed, the small weed, hardly growing 30 centimeters tall on the old lands, dominating on the old lands, compared to grass, natural grass that grows a meter and higher outside the old land. Pine trees doesn't mind the thick, tall grass, but it suffers from the nutsedge. And the story is, pine trees are highly dependent on a symbiosis with a mycorrhizae, a fungus, to such an extent that the pine seedlings in the nurseries are inoculated with a specific mycorrhizae. And that mycorrhizae assists the young seedling to take up water and nutrients. And without that, the pine tree cannot establish. So we found that exudate, chemicals released by yellow nutsedge, inhibits not so much the pine seedling, but the mycorrhizae. And together with plant pathologists at University of Pretoria, we proved that it was an indirect allelopathic effect. And it goes through as a allelopathic effect because fungi and plants are grouped together. So you have a plant effect which indirectly harms another plant.
Standard Bank. Voluit vorentoe.
Lisa Roberts now continues her discussion she had earlier this year with Professor Charlie Reinhardt about yellow nutsedge.
But apparently it inhibits soybean growth.
Well, that's just one of the crops. It's not, soybeans have no particular sensitivity to Cyprus esculentus or the chemicals it exudes. It's just that where you grow soybeans, in South Africa at least, dry beans as well, you will find nutsedge. And if not under irrigation, if it's dry land conditions, you will have a nutsedge problem. So the two are always thrown together in most cases. And the benefit that soybean has above the nutsedge is the biomass, which soybeans produces in a relatively rapid time, in a short time. So canopy closure, nutsedge doesn't like shade conditions. So if you have a cropping system where the crop can overshadow the nutsedge as soon as possible, the nutsedge suffers significantly. But nutsedge can give any crop a go in terms of interference. And when I say interference, I refer to competition plus allelopathy. Nutsedge also has the ability, it's been found for nutsedge, that we call it luxury uptake of nutrients. So nutsedge is renowned. Other weeds does it as well. They actually absorb more nutrients than they actually require, as if they're preparing for lean times. And that makes them particularly strongly competitive. And if you add the allelopathic effect, it's just not good for crops. And the way that allelopathy and competition probably work together is that allelopathy would affect the crop from seed germination. Typical of allelopathic compounds is that they inhibit seed germination. Competition doesn't do that. competitions for water, light and nutrients. And that only kicks in once plants have emerged and start growing. But if you put a plant on the back foot, you inhibit it from seed germination, it's predisposed to competition effect. And that's the way allelopathy and competition operates together in a harmful way in nature.
Charlie, I'd like to get back to the soya bean. Apparently it fights back.
The fighting back is, I've checked. There are scientific articles on not just soybean having allelopathic effects on other plants, but also legumes in general. So legumes, in fact, can fight back against weeds in a chemical way. But sunflower stands out as one of the sunflower and the small grains. They have particularly strong allelopathic effects. Even maize have allelopathic effects. But the chemicals differ from plant to plant, from cultivar to cultivar even, and you get plants that are just stronger in terms of allelopathic effect, like the brassicas, the cauliflower type plants, very popular as cover crops. Wild mustard and crops like that are planted to suppress not only weeds, but also nematodes and bacteria and fungi, harmful bacteria and fungi. So it differs. These chemicals that can protect the plant differs in nature, in molecular structure. They differ from plant to plant, and the amounts also differ. But come back to what soybean that has as a defense against nutsedge is basically mostly due to that its ability to form a dense canopy. And you can actually rotation, if you have maize doesn't form such a dense canopy, so if you have a situation where nutsedge as a problem weed, use maize and soybean in rotation. And it's well known that whilst you have the soybean crop in the rotation, it causes significant suppression of nutsedge. And if it does that, you have less tubers because nutsedge proliferates through tuber production, underground tubers. And if you suppress the plant above ground, there's much less energy that can go into tuber production. And it's actually a practice, maize soybean rotation, to get rid of nutsedge or to get nutsedge under control.
Oh, that was a very informative discussion about the yellow nut sedge. And our thanks to Dr. Charlie Reinhardt. He's an expert in the field of weeds.
Netafim. Grow more with less.
Vertoon u diere tekens van swak groei en diarree. Baie plase word geraak deur ongediagnoseerde diere wat koksidia het. By Koks 5% is 'n koksidioseed, 1 dosis op 'n jong ouderdom, help met lewenslange immuniteit teen koksidia, wat verbeterde groei en vroeë bevrugting aanhelp. Anders as antibiotika, maak by Koks 5% die intrasellulêre stadiums van die parasiet dood en bevorder die ontwikkeling van natuurlike immuniteit. Voorkom, beskerm, profyt met by Koks 5%. Beskikbaar by u dieregesondheidsverskaffer of vra u beheeragent.
Veeboere, maak seker julle loop nie Maandag se episode van Plaas TV mis nie. 'n kriminologie student, Cicely Dorewaard, het by ons in die ateljee kom kuier en haar insiggewende navorsing oor die profiel van 'n veedief met ons gedeel. Ons kyk maandag na hierdie interessante onderhoud.